Greetings and salutations. It is time for your favorite politically incorrect sports commentary podcast. Yes, here on Wednesday night, June the 17th, 2026. It is time for the great and the glorious Sports Frenzy 2.0. The first version, of course, was on cable access television in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. But now we are a podcast, hence version 2.0. I am one of your hosts. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Your other normal host would have been my brother from another mother, the conquistador Dave Height. But he is off tonight. As I always say, somehow he gets to take off 4 or 5 episodes a year, and I have to keep soldiering on, which I love to do. Don't get me wrong. But a vacation might be nice once in a while. Now he's off doing parenting stuff, trying to help his sons out with some important financial things, so we applaud him. It would be nice if more parents took responsibility like that. So, of course, he gets the blessing of the Maestro in terms of taking the week off. He'll be back next week. The problem is he's missing out on a lot of cool sports discussion. And then, of course, when we get to the weekend edition, which drops Saturday morning, your Saturday morning hangover cure, even cooler stuff, dare I say, on that. But we are going to follow up to start things off here on Sports Frenzy. Again, Wednesday night, June the 17th. We're going to start the same way we started last week's episode. Because this is such an important topic. Not only for college football, but for sports in general. And of course, because we're dealing with a selfish prick. Yeah, that's you, Brendan Sorsby. All of the gnashing, the teeth gnashing, and the hand wringing could have been avoided if this little selfish prick would have made the decision he just made within the last couple days, a week or two ago, instead of having attorneys general from different states fighting it out, threatening lawsuits, one saying the other doesn't know what he's talking about when he's threatening to bring the hammer down on the Big 12. So let's get you caught up on this saga before we get to, once again, the anticlimactic conclusion, once again, put forth by the selfish prick, Brendan Sorsby. Following up from last week, after this biased, pathetic judge said that Brendan Sorsby could play for Texas Tech this upcoming season, while only having to serve a 2-game suspension, which was predetermined. And of course, everybody went ape shit crazy because it was wrong. It was the wrong decision. And I'll say exactly what I said last week once again. It scares the hell out of me that these biased judges don't care about the letter of the law, don't care about the heart and soul of the law. They care about their own selfish beliefs and needs. And it should scare all of us, because none of us want to get caught up in this system with people like this making decisions like this. So this idiotic ruling comes down. The NCAA says we're going to appeal. Initially, they were told, well, we'll hear your appeal after the football season is over. which of course does nothing for anybody. Then you've got the Texas Attorney General threatening the Big 12, saying, don't you dare think you can penalize Texas Tech or this young man after the judge's ruling. Otherwise, I'll come after you. Well, then the Oklahoma Attorney General came out and said, no, you need to, speaking to the Big 12, suspend this kid. And the Texas Attorney General doesn't know what the hell he's talking about because he doesn't have the right to do anything to the Big 12 if they choose to impose penalties or sanctions on Texas Tech and Brendan Sorsby. Now we go back to the NCAA, where they went on this appeal and said, listen, you have got to make a decision on this. You can't put it off until the end of the football season after the national championship game. They asked for an expedited decision the day before the season starts, August the 28th. So you've got all this garbage going on, all this legal wrangling going on. Then the selfish prick, which is what he's going to be called heretofore on this podcast for all eternity, the selfish prick, Brendan Sorsby, who probably sat back and laughed over the last couple weeks watching all this. Oh, look at everybody's fighting over me. I feel so cool. I feel so awesome. And I understand if you have a gambling problem, you need to please get help. But at the same time, there is also a level of personal accountability involved. If you go out and you gamble, regardless of whether you have a gambling addiction or not, if you go out and you gamble away all your life savings and then go, oh, I have an addiction. Can I please have my money back? Because it was an addiction. It wasn't my fault. God forbid I take personal responsibility for my actions. So please give me all my money back, as I've now declared I have a problem and I'm going to seek treatment. That's not how it works. But again, we circle back to this idiotic judge in Lubbock who wanted to take all personal responsibility away from Brendan Sorsby. And listening to the idiot lawyer, yes, everybody has the right to legal representation. However, a lot of times, these lawyers are sleazy and they have no moral compass and they will defend anybody and everybody, even if they know they're guilty as hell. If you don't let Brendan Sorsby play, it will cause irreparable harm. Maybe it should, jackass. Maybe it should. But of course, again, this judge in Lubbock says, oh, I agree with that. Doesn't go into any more detail on his ruling. Just says, I agree with that. Sorsby gets to play. Which, again, caused all of this chaos and confusion. Of course, the Big 12 also filed a federal lawsuit against Texas Tech and the Texas Attorney General. So the entire state of Texas was fractured over this mess. But in the end, yes, we all know by now what happened. The selfish prick, Brendan Sorsby, says, oh, I decided I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm going to enter the NFL supplemental draft. So I will end my college career, and there's no more need for lawsuits. There are needs for lawsuits. There are still plenty of issues to be resolved because of you, you selfish prick. Because now we have to figure out, we have to define what power the conferences have, what power the NCAA has to impose rules, to impose penalties on the rules that they set forth. To create the rules and how they can impose, when they can impose the penalties for infractions on said rules. So this is not over by any means. Just because the selfish prick, Brendan Sorsby, has bowed out, what happens when the next kid comes along who gambles, who bets on his own team, and some shyster lawyer wants to take up the cause? It needs to be resolved, and it needs to be resolved now, before the season starts. I don't know if the government's bill that they're trying to push through will solve it. All I know where I stand. And these goddamn judges need to back the fuck off. You're not playing by the rules, which is what a judge is supposed to do. The judge is supposed to follow the law. The judge is not supposed to show partisanship or bias based on the school that they went to or the school in the district where they preside. It's a sick, twisted, awful system. And of course, because we have humans involved, that's what you're going to get. No, I'm not saying we should turn into the movie Mercy and everything should be adjudicated through AI. But how about we adjudicate through common sense and, again, following the law? I still think this judge that we talked about last week, he needs to go away. But we make these judges almost bulletproof. We make them immortal in terms of they can hang around as long as they want and do whatever they want. And believe me, I know stories about judges. I used to work in a courthouse for many, many years. I won't tell you where, but I heard stories, not only in that district, but in other districts. These judges are some twisted, sick people in many, many instances. Term limits on judges, term limits on our Congress, the Senate, the House. People get power, they get power mad, they get senile, they get too old to make quick, logical decisions. And it needs to stop. Because it's gone too far. Not just in college sports, but in every facet of life. From the Supreme Court all the way down. Stop voting with your heart. Stop making decisions with your heart or based on your political views. Pay attention to the law and what's right and what's wrong. I wouldn't think that would be so hard, but I guess in 2026 it is. All right, as you know, last week we established the fact that, a couple rules are in place here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. Now, rules that week in, week out we follow are that, number one, we don't care who we piss off. We're not here to make friends. We're here to give you our opinions which would never ever fly on the mothership or any other major sports network. Yeah, partially because of the cursing. And then, of course, we also do not apologize unless we are factually incorrect about something. You should never apologize for your opinion. Now, recently we have had to also institute the rule that we are not going to talk about soccer. We don't care about the World Cup here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. We don't like soccer here. I will make an exception, though, because I saw this story today. Boston. Many bars in Boston are running out of beer because of the Scottish soccer fans who have invaded Boston, and they are drinking supposedly at 4 times the expected rate. So bars are having to put in emergency orders to restock as quickly as possible. And then, of course, I love the fact that you've got so many stories out there, and a lot of other people have brought this up as well. I'm not the first. But I love the fact that all of these people are coming over here from different countries, and they just love the U.S., marveling at all the little things that we take for granted that they don't get to enjoy in their home countries. And yet, day in and day out, if you listen to the stupid idiots on CNN or any of the mass media outlets, they're going to tell you how awful America is. Robert De Niro and Jane Fonda and Bette Midler. Yet we've got all these people coming in for the World Cup amazed at Waffle House. Amazed at free refills on soda. Things, again, we take for granted. And we've got to sit here and complain about biased judges, stupid political organizations that finance violence and riots, and a media that is so unbelievably biased. It's pathetic. And then when they're called out on it, they scream and cry and yell foul. So kudos to all these fans coming in from other countries. I hope we're doing our best to make you feel welcome as you're here to visit and you're here legally. So that's it for soccer. The lack of beer in Boston is all we're going to talk about when it comes to the World Cup. Now, unfortunately, we have to get this out of the way as well. I don't like talking about it. The New York Knicks have won the NBA championship. 4-1 over the San Antonio Spurs. You all know this by now. The parade is, as we're recording on June the 17th, the parade will be tomorrow, June the 18th. And of course, Dave's beloved White Sox are stuck in New York right now playing the Yankees. And they're going to have to be witness to this garbage, this ticker tape parade. Now, this is the first title for the Knicks, as we all know, in 53 years. The problem with this whole thing isn't the Knicks. This team was very carefully constructed, well constructed. You had unselfish players like Jalen Brunson, the MVP of the finals. taking less money so the front office could go out and make deals and bring in players to make this a championship team. This is how it's supposed to work. Now, the Spurs did not help matters at all. The Spurs pulled one of the biggest choke jobs ever. And I'm not trying to take away from the Knicks championship. You know, they had the streak going, and then, of course, they lost the one game to San Antonio that broke the streak. So they only had the second longest winning streak in NBA playoff history. But the Spurs, and I'm not saying the fix was in, okay? Even though you know I am a big-time conspiracy theorist, I don't think the fix was in. However, I find it remarkable that the Spurs had a 12 or more point lead in every single game. And they also had the lead in the final 4 minutes of every single game. And they only managed to win one of them? So there's a problem here. There's a problem here with the Spurs. Whether it's coaching, maybe it's the youth. It's a young team. We get that. Maybe Victor Wembanyama is going to turn out to be one of these players like James Harden or Kevin Durant, who doesn't really know how to close the deal and win a championship. Yes, I know Durant has a couple rings, but we all know he just conveniently slid right in to the whole Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Steve Kerr template in Golden State. Note, Kevin Durant has not been able to do anything remotely close to what he did with the Golden State Warriors in those few years he was there. Whether it's injury, whether it's just greed, unadulterated greed, taking the most money he could get and then deciding, I don't really need to try anymore. I don't need to rehab as hard as I should. Ask the Brooklyn Nets about that. Is that the road Victor Wembanyama is going to go down now? Now, there's a big difference between him physically and guys like Durant and Harden. Victor Wembanyama is a physical freak. But now doubt creeps in. What's the problem? It would have probably been different if the Spurs had forced 6 or 7 games, at least. Knicks still win, but for them to just bow out as meekly as they did, again, raises a lot of questions about the future of the Spurs. Do they have the right guy in charge in terms of head coach? Of course, this now makes me wonder about the Orlando Magic, my team, and them taking one of the assistants off this staff in San Antonio. But they did beat the Thunder. So, how quickly we forget. So let's put a bow on this, because I really don't want to talk about the Knicks all that much anymore. Obnoxious fans is the problem I have with this championship. Knicks fans, New York fans are the worst, and it's not even close. They riot and burn and pillage if they win. They riot and burn and pillage if they lose. And my God, all I have heard, and I have listened to the least amount of sports talk over the last 2 weeks than I have in the last decade. Because a lot of what I listen to is based out of New York. I've explained this. I don't like Chicago sports radio, which is, of course, here within an hour and a half, 2 hours of our studio. Even though I'm a Bears fan, even though I'm a Cubs fan, the score out of Chicago to me is pathetic. It's awful. It's probably a lot of things in the past, like the jackass Dan Bernstein, one of the most miserable, disgusting human beings in the world, who happened to rule the airwaves on the score in Chicago for years. But now the New York sports radio has become insufferable. They can't stop talking about the Knicks. I don't know when it'll end. I never thought I would actually want to hear more talk about the Yankees. I almost want to go slap myself for saying that. But now all I hear from these Knicks fans is Jalen Brunson is one of the greatest basketball players ever. Not just one of the greatest Knicks ever. They've already anointed him the greatest Knick of all time. No, we're talking, they're already getting ready to put him up there with Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. After one championship, because this is how pathetic and demented New York sports fans are. And that's why everybody outside of New York hates New York sports fans. They're illogical and they're borderline insane. And of course, viewership records. And I am going to keep saying this and keep pounding it into your heads, people. We are being lied to when it comes to all of these record viewership numbers. They're changing the game is what they're doing. They're changing the way they monitor who watches what. Because I'm getting tired of every single sporting event every week sets a new record. It's not possible. It's not, unless you change the rules of the game. Because, of course, we get the most watched finals since 1998. 28 years. Average viewership over the 5 games of 20.6 million. Now, see, I look at it in a different perspective. I look at it in a different way. The fact that the Knicks had this near historic run after they dropped, 2 games to the Hawks, they only lost 1 more game the rest of the way, right? How much revenue did the NBA lose because of the Knicks run? How much ad revenue, did the NBA and their brand new partners, remember, they're just starting a new TV and streaming deal. NBC and Peacock just came aboard, right? ESPN. The Knicks plowing through weak competition, and yes, that's another thing that bothers me about this title, is that they plowed through weak-ass competition. They never had to play the Celtics. They never had to play the Pistons. through no fault of their own, allegedly, all of these games that should have and could have been played, game 6s, game 7s, that didn't happen. Don't tell me that this was not a disastrous year for the NBA when it comes to making money. Now, they're going to take these numbers, which I still say are fudged, and they're going to go, oh, look at the record viewership numbers we've got. So we'll adjust your ad rates accordingly. They'll go up. So we can get more commercials from Progressive and State Farm and the pharmaceutical companies. Meanwhile, I still think we're being lied to on multiple fronts. I think this NBA media deal is already off to a terrible start in terms of the money coming in, the revenue, and the viewership numbers. I still think are being, I'm not saying they're lying, but I'm saying they're adjusting these numbers in ways that they didn't adjust the numbers in the past. The Nielsen ratings, they're fudging them, changing them. There's panel data, there's big data, and they're trying to just confuse the issue so that they all look great and they can keep jacking up the ad numbers regardless of the fact that they lost out on so many games and so much additional revenue because of the Knicks' near historic run. And by the way, last thing on this, going back to game 4 of the finals, again, massive choke job by the Spurs. The 29-point comeback in game 4 for the New York New York Knicks, like the Nets will ever win a championship in our lifetime. The poor, pathetic Brooklyn Nets. But the 29-point comeback for the Knicks in game 4 last week was, yes, an NBA Finals record. If you recall, your Uncle Dave and I were giving you updates on that game. Now, of course, we ended up finishing up the podcast episode last week, June the 10th, before the game was over. So, of course, by the time the game ended, you had the massive 29-point comeback. When your Uncle Dave told me, because we ended up going in, recording the weekend edition after that, and then at the end of the weekend edition is when he told me the Spurs choked it all away. And if you go back and listen to the weekend edition from last Saturday, you'll actually hear us at the very end of that episode talking about it. And I don't want to just in a bubble. I know that brings up bad memories of COVID and that Lakers championship, but I don't have a problem with this group of guys, this team winning a championship. I will say it again, it is a beautifully constructed roster. I don't like the fact that Mike Brown stepped in and won the title. I still think Tom Thibodeau should get a lot of credit, but we've seen this in the past where one coach brings a team almost all the way up to the pinnacle, and then another guy, for whatever reason, personality clashes, another guy steps in and ends up nudging the team the rest of the way. I just don't like the fans. I don't like New York fans at all. Show some brains, show some class. Jalen Brunson is not one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Get over it. Great player? Yes, obviously. Great run in the playoffs this year? Yes, obviously. Not one of the greatest players of all time. You guys and your fake celebrities. Taylor Swift. What, does Taylor Swift root for any champion she can latch onto? So now she's a Knicks fan. She's a Knicks fan. She's a Chiefs fan. What, is she a Dodgers fan too? All the idiot celebrities. Ben Stiller's an idiot. Spike Lee's an idiot. The only one I will not call an idiot is Timothée Chalamet. For some reason, I like the guy. And I truly believe he is a Knicks fan. Spike Lee is a Knicks fan, but he's just a jackass. Ben Stiller, I don't care. He's a jackass. And remember, he went to the Met Gala instead of going to one of the Knicks playoff games. So he's not a true fan. You skip the Met Gala and you go to see the Knicks. If you're that big of a Knicks fan, you skip the Met Gala. Jackass. Then finally in the NBA, we do have some coaching news. So yes, we can finally stop talking about the fucking Knicks. And we have to talk now about the pathetic Bulls, the Chicago Bulls. Some are saying this is a shrewd move, as they swooped in and hired Tiago Splitter away from Portland. He was Portland's interim head coach, and he was a finalist for the permanent job with the Trail Blazers, but the Bulls went in and said, nope, don't wait for them. Come here, come to Chicago. We will hire you now. And so Splitter said, okay, I will take the certainty of a head coaching job over the uncertainty, I guess, of Portland. I don't know if Portland was delaying things, hemming and hawing. If they liked the job that Tiago Splitter did as an interim coach, why not just hire him? Well, you can't now. Now he is going to Chicago to coach the Bulls. Good luck, Tiago. You're going to need it. Now, the interesting thing here is that I believe there are only 2 head coaching jobs left open in the NBA. And you still have Jason Kidd out there. You still have Billy Donovan out there. And it doesn't sound like they're in consideration for either of the openings that are left. In the WNBA, because you kids know by now, I'm not going to say I love the WNBA, but I admire the fact that the gameplay is a little bit more like college, a little bit rougher. You almost feel like you can relate to some of the things they do and the air balls and the shots they take. But at the same time, they have true moments of glory and they play some really good basketball at times. So, of course, I follow the Indiana Fever. The Fever are playing well right now, relatively speaking. They will not be repeating as the Commissioner's Cup champions. However, they are now 9-5, riding a 4-game winning streak. That's great, except for the fact that I've been watching them, and I still don't think they're playing top-level basketball, and they've been beating up on really, really bad teams. And anytime they play a good team, like the New York Liberty, they show how weak they really are. There's still something wrong with the makeup of this team. So we'll see. we will see what happens with the Fever here as we close in a couple weeks away from, I believe, the All-Star break, the halfway point in the season. Because right now in 2026, the WNBA plays a 44-game regular season schedule. However, it has just been announced that will change in 2027. So can't wait to hear the negotiations on this. One would hope that they had already discussed this since the new labor deal just went into effect a few months ago. But the WNBA regular season schedule will go to 50 games next year. Like I said, let's see what happens if the geniuses in charge didn't actually negotiate this ahead of time with the players. Speaking of geniuses, one last thing when it comes to basketball, going to the college ranks. And I wish your Uncle Dave was here. I give him credit. He's a Notre Dame fan, but he despises their athletic director, Pete Bevacqua, even more than I do. After that immature bullshit that the guy spewed last year when Notre Dame didn't make the college football playoff. Now, I did agree that Notre Dame probably deserved to be in ahead of Alabama. But they did not deserve to be in ahead of Miami. Miami beat them in the regular season. And then Bevacqua went off on the ACC, basically saying, why are you showing preference and backing Miami instead of us? Well, maybe because you're not a full-time member of the ACC, moron. But somehow this guy keeps falling ass backwards into good luck and recognition, I guess we should say, as he will now serve a 4-year stint on the men's NCAA basketball selection committee. And I believe that makes him the first athletic director. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I'm 99% sure I'm right. I think this makes him the first athletic director to serve on both the men's basketball selection committee and the selection committee for college football's playoff system. Couldn't pick a dumber guy. Because remember, this guy came from NBC. This is not like a guy who has been working and fighting in the trenches in smaller schools and working his way up the corporate ladder. No. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It happens to be a guy who works at the network that gave Notre Dame an exclusive contract that's been going on seemingly forever now. Notre Dame gets basically their own football network. And of course, we all know this year, this upcoming year, they have got the cakiest of cakiest schedules. Cake, cake, and more cake. Let them eat cake. Because that's all Notre Dame is going to do. Cakiest, I'm going to try to come up with the dumbest, stupidest adjectives involving cake for Notre Dame's schedule. The only tough game they have is against my Miami Hurricanes. And even if they lose that at home, they will still cruise into the college football playoffs because the rest of their schedule is cakealicious. Cake-tacular. We also have to acknowledge, we've acknowledged the Knicks as champions in basketball. Let's acknowledge the Carolina Hurricanes. And I feel bad for them because I knew when they won in 6 games over the weekend, beating the Las Vegas Golden Knights, they were not going to get any attention. Because Monday morning, when all of the big shows, the big talking heads in sports, when they showed up on Monday morning on whatever network it might be, it was going to be all about the Knicks. And nobody was going to acknowledge the Carolina Hurricanes, which is sad. It would have been better for them if the series had gone 7 games, because then they could have gotten out from under the shadow of the Knicks. One of the most impressive runs, we talk about the Knicks, we should also talk about the Carolina Hurricanes having one of the most impressive runs in NHL playoff history, as they went 16-3 throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Conn Smythe for the MVP of the postseason went to Jordan Staal. And yes, once again, record viewership, even for hockey. Now, they're saying it is the most watched Stanley Cup final ever in the United States. But these numbers don't seem all that impressive to me. So I might need to do a little bit more research on this. However, they're saying that the games in the Stanley Cup final averaged 1.8 million viewers. Now, is that the entire playoff run, not just the Stanley Cup final? Maybe then I could see it. I've got to believe you had more than 1.8 million on average watching the Hurricanes and the Golden Knights. If you've got 20 million plus watching the Knicks and the Spurs, you had to have more than 1.8 million watching Carolina and Vegas in the NHL. So again, that number, that 1.8 million number, might be for the entire Stanley Cup playoffs, from first round all the way through the final. That would make more sense to me. Couple other little things to clean up in the NHL. John Tortorella will not return as the head coach of the Las Vegas Golden Knights, even though he did get them to the Stanley Cup final. This, I guess, was agreed upon, that he was not guaranteed. He didn't say he was going to come back. Las Vegas didn't tell him they would be more than happy to bring him back. So, despite the fact that the Las Vegas Golden Knights got to the Stanley Cup final, won a couple games, they're looking for a new head coach. So that sounds to me like a pretty cushy gig for whoever wants it. Now, I wonder if they're going to recycle somebody just like they recycled Tortorella, because the NHL seems like they recycle head coaches more than any of the other 4 major leagues of sports in North America. And then we should also give some praise to the Hart Trophy winner. We just talked about the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, the MVP for the playoffs. The Hart Trophy goes to the MVP for the regular season. And for the second time, Tampa Bay's Nikita Kucherov wins the Hart Trophy. in other smaller sports. I hate to do that, but it's true. You know, we're saving baseball, we're saving the NFL, we're saving NASCAR here. So let's knock out the UFL. Woo! How long have you guys been waiting to crown the 2026 champion in the UFL? I'm usually the guy. When I go to the grocery store, I will always try the new flavor. I don't care if it's Doritos or ice cream, whatever it might be. I see a new flavor and I go, I need to try that. And I'm kind of the same way with my sports. I'm always willing to jump on a bandwagon for one of these spring football leagues, you know, anything kind of new and different. Although it didn't really last all that long for me, because we're going back a few years now. Remember, you had the XFL and the USFL, and then, of course, they merged and became the UFL. And I don't think I've watched one single solitary minute of the UFL. But let's give some props to the Louisville Kings. In the championship game, they beat the DC Defenders 27-20. And I'm just going to say, I root for spring football to work. I still think there's got to be a way that it can work. But so many have tried and so many have failed. I just don't know what the answer is. The College World Series, men's College World Series, of course, the women just finished up last week with their softball. Now we're talking about actual baseball. We have the Final Four in the College World Series. Georgia, Oklahoma, North Carolina, and West Virginia. So next week, of course, your Uncle Dave and I will help to anoint, and celebrate the 2026 Men's College World Series champions. In golf, you know, this is the year that I have jumped on the golf bandwagon, the PGA Tour, since obviously Live Golf is in a coma and on life support. But I've been watching pretty much every tournament this year. And last weekend was no exception. I did watch a decent chunk of the RBC Canadian Open, even though a lot of the big names were taking the week off in preparation for this upcoming weekend, the U.S. Open at Shinnecock. And of course, we will break that all down for you next week here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. Bud Cauley ended up winning his first PGA Tour event in his 239th start. And then, not trying to distract or take away from Bud Cauley's impressive victory, but something we need to monitor, involves Brooks Koepka, one of the bigger names in golf. Now, he says he is going to play at the U.S. Open. However, he had to withdraw from the RBC Canadian Open, despite the fact that he was tied for the lead after the first round, played fairly well in the second round. The problem was on Saturday. Came out on Saturday, had some kind of a hand issue, had somebody following along with him to minister treatment. Shot, I believe, a 2-over on Saturday. Just realized when he came out Sunday to warm up. He could not go, had to withdraw from the tournament completely, despite the fact he did not have a bad score going into Sunday. So I find it very odd, interesting and odd, that he says he's okay for the U.S. Open after basically conceding just this past Sunday that he could not play golf. Then, of course, we had the big fight last Sunday on the White House lawn. UFC Freedom 250 on Donald Trump's birthday. Now, we don't normally talk about UFC, so we're not going to start now. I don't have a problem, by the way, with them doing this. I think it's kind of cool. I don't get as worked up about some of the stupid shit that Donald Trump does as other people. I don't think this was stupid. I think him trying to put his name on the Kennedy Center was stupid, but that has been rectified. Of course, the sad thing about the UFC Freedom 250 event was now news is coming out that there was a massive terror plot that luckily was stopped, that was potentially going to involve a significant loss of life if it was pulled off. And this is, again, is the world we live in, and it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And I blame, again, all the idiots in the mass media, all the talking heads who sit there and basically incite violence. And then when violence happens, they go, oh no, that's terrible. Because they're a bunch of fucking scumbag hypocrites. And don't think their words and their actions don't help inspire zealots like this, who almost pulled off an unbelievably horrific attack at the White House for this UFC Freedom 250 event. And then you've got the fighter, the idiot fighter, hurling an insult at Michelle Obama. Why? Just, what was the point other than you needed to be a raging asshat? And then somebody in the media, of course, had to draw comparisons to this UFC event and ancient Rome. Now, I find that fascinating because I have always been a student of ancient Rome, and I've always said that there is no society, no civilization that will last forever. And of course, the Roman Empire was considered one of, if not the greatest, societies in the history of man. And we all know, even those who've never really delved into it know, Nero fiddling while Rome burned, and all the tawdry tales, and how you had the filthy rich, and how they took advantage of the poor, and people want to draw parallels like that to what America is right now. Again, stop listening to the mass media. They are scum. Now, you know who's not scum? By the way, I should have brought this up earlier when we were talking about the WNBA. My Clint Eastwood badasses of the week. Going to go back here to the Indiana Fever. And yes, I am hard on them because I root for them. That's why I always am bagging on Kelsey Mitchell. And, I'm the one that says Caitlin Clark isn't as great as everybody thinks she is. And I'll stand by that. I think she's really, really good. I think she's great for the league, but she's not the greatest player in the league. That would be Asia Wilson. And I like Aaliyah Boston a lot. But Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston pulled off something that had never been done before in the WNBA. They ended up being the first ever pair of teammates to record 30-point double-doubles in one game. Of course, Caitlin Clark got 30 points and double figures in assists. Aaliyah Boston, 30 points and double figures in rebounds. Very impressive, very, very impressive showing. So kudos to Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, my Clint Eastwood badasses of the week. Not a lot to talk about in the NFL. Just a couple minutes here. Although I feel a little vindicated, and I don't know why. I think it's because there are certain players, there are certain coaches who I like, who I admire. They might not be the most popular. They might not be the most successful. Of course, my favorite baseball player of all time is Ryne Sandberg. And of course, he never sniffed a World Series with the Cubs. My favorite basketball team is the Orlando Magic. They've been to the finals twice, but they've never won. One of my favorite coaches in the NFL, if not my favorite, one of my favorites. Kind of hard for me to go against Ben Johnson right now, but Sean Payton, he's got the one ring. He got the one ring. He won with, of course, the New Orleans Saints. Had the absolute massive bull-sized cojones to pull off that onside kick at the beginning of the second half against the Colts, if I'm not mistaken. Sean Payton, obviously the Broncos, after the Russell Wilson debacle, seeing how quickly Sean Payton got them out of that mess. Sean Payton got a reworked deal. He got an extension with the Broncos through 2030, which, and again, this happens with many, many teams, lines him up with the general manager as well. These teams like to have the general manager and the head coach on the same path, on the same contracts, so that, unfortunately, if you have to, you get rid of both of them at the same time. But kudos to Sean Payton again. I love Sean Payton as a head coach. Always have, always will. Yeah, I know he got in trouble for the whole Bounty Gate thing. I still wonder how much of that was him and how much of that was Greg Williams. I'm not exonerating Sean Payton, just putting it out there. But doesn't seem to bother Denver at all, as they're more than happy to stick with Sean Payton here for the foreseeable future. And then we have a little bit of, I don't know if you call it irony, but former Bears general manager Ryan Pace. Now, I tried to stick up for Ryan Pace. I did. And everybody thinks I'm negative. Everybody thinks I'm such a negative fucking pessimist. And I am. But I do try my best, even though I am in the last quarter of my life. I do try to see the positive in people. I do have hope for humanity. Recently, I have conceded to your Uncle Dave on this podcast that after years of trying to understand what Roger Goodell was doing with discipline in terms of players and many other things, the international expansion of the NFL, I finally conceded that your Uncle Dave was right. Roger Goodell's an idiot. Same thing with former Bears general manager Ryan Pace. I tried to stick up for Ryan Pace for as long as I could before I finally had to say, yup, he is really a buffoon. Well, now he is the Vikings problem because Ryan Pace, I believe he just spent some time in the Atlanta Falcons organization, but Ryan Pace will now be an advisor for the Minnesota Vikings. And all I can say is, I think that helps the Bears out. All right, time to talk baseball. Time to talk about my pathetic Chicago Cubs. And of course, Dave's upstart Chicago White Sox. But of course, before we get into baseball, I have to do this particular public service. Normally, your Uncle Dave would do this. You're listening to us somewhere, and of course, we love you and we appreciate that. But you have options and choices. You can listen to Sports Frenzy 2.0, including the weekend edition, on Spotify, Good Pods, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And then, of course, don't forget our Facebook page where we post all of our panels picks, our expert panels picks, whether it is baseball, whether it is NASCAR, and then we get into football season and you've got all of our weekly football picks. That stuff all gets posted on our Facebook page. And I did mention, of course, the weekend edition, your Saturday morning hangover cure, your favorite politically incorrect pop culture commentary podcast. Coming up this weekend. Now, I've got to do a little bit of a juggling act here again because your Uncle Dave will not be available, and I don't like to step on his toes, but we set up a week ahead of time what we're going to review, and then when something pops up like this, I get kind of stuck. Now, he is very laid back, of course, whereas I'm the neurotic one, so I get all worked up and worried about it, and he says, just review whatever the hell you want, and I'll play catch-up next week if I have to. So most definitely, we will be reviewing Journey live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Your Uncle Dave and I, along with his wife, Mrs. C, one of our expert panelists, saw Journey this past Sunday night at the Van Andel Arena on their Final Frontier tour. It was spectacular. I will break it down for you this weekend. Going to end up telling you now that next week, not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday, Dave and I will review Amazon Prime's Spider Noir with Nicolas Cage. We both finally got through that. That I'll save and do with him. Might have a couple movie reviews for you. Might have one, might have two. Brand new on HBO Max, They Will Kill You, starring the lovely Zazie Beetz. And then I will once again, for the second week in a row, travel back in time. Possibly, maybe. I might hold off on this for a week. We'll see. See what kind of time I need to fill this weekend as I nurse you through your hangover. But last week I reviewed the 1944 Philip Marlowe detective classic, Murder My Sweet. This week I might review the 1946 Philip Marlowe classic, Lady in the Lake, starring Robert Montgomery. I have a feeling I'll probably end up reviewing that this coming Saturday. So, whole bunch of really cool stuff, as usual. It's what you've come to expect from the weekend edition. This Saturday morning, which of course would be June the 20th, 2026. All right, back to sports. As promised, back to baseball. The Cubs just, I don't know what's going on with them. The one positive with the Cubs, of course, is of all the players in the lineup, Pete Crow Armstrong has finally caught fire. He is finally playing like the rest of these guys should be playing. And congratulations to Pete Crow Armstrong. He is, yes, yet another of my Clint Eastwood badasses of the week, as he hit for the 13th cycle in Cubs history a couple days ago. Now, of course, because the Cubs suck donkey balls, they had to go to, I believe, extra innings to win the game, despite the fact that PCA did everything in his power to try to lead them to an easier victory. Because there are no easy victories with this goddamn team. And yes, a lot of it has to do with pitching injuries, because we have another Cubs pitching injury. I believe this is the second time already this year, and we're not even halfway through. Closer Daniel Palencia is going back to the IL with elbow issues, elbow soreness. Not good. Not good at all. And we're already down Cade Horton for the long haul, Justin Steele for the long haul. Don't know when Matthew Boyd is finally going to get back. So again, I just mentioned this. Remember, kids, I just mentioned this a couple minutes ago. How I am the guy that always tries to stick up, whether it's for Ryan Pace or whether it's for Roger Goodell. In this case, it's going to be for Craig Counsell. I don't see how any of this is really his fault. Especially now in retrospect, when I was the guy who was ripping on David Ross when the offense wasn't working, when they weren't producing, when they weren't scoring runs. Now I'm seeing the exact same thing for the most part with these players under Craig Counsell, and I'm telling you, it is the analytics jackasses, it is the front office. Somebody is getting into these guys' heads and screwing up their approach to the plate. They've destroyed my man Nico Horner. They have absolutely, somebody has destroyed him. He started off this season, the first month, like a house on fire. He got his extension after dealing with trade rumors for a year plus. And I, of course, was saying, no, don't you dare trade him. And then the first month, he was phenomenal. And then all of a sudden, he's forgotten how to hit. And it's not pretty. It is not pretty at all. They've dropped him from the leadoff spot all the way down towards the bottom of the order. Now he's getting days off here and there because they're trying anything and everything they can to get him going. But he's not the only one. Like I said, outside of Pete Crow Armstrong, you could blame anybody and everybody in this lineup. The great Ian Happ, who everybody knows I can't stand, is hitting under 220. Oh, but he's on pace for 30 home runs. Big freaking whoop-de-doo. He's hitting under 220. Dansby Swanson is an embarrassment. He's hitting under 180 the last time I checked. Bregman barely treading water. Michael Bush barely treading water. He was hitting okay for a while. Now I think he might be dinged up. And I've already told you about the pitching staff. So again, I'm not blaming Craig Counsell for this. And the Cubs, they just need to get hot again like they were early on in the season. Remember, this was a team that put together not one, but two 10-game winning streaks earlier this season. Yes, to go along with a 10-game losing streak. As of this taping, the Cubs are 38-36. They're in third place in the National League Central, but unfortunately already 8 games behind the Milwaukee Brewers. So right now you're thinking wild card. The good news is they're not that far out of the wild card. And we're still not quite to the halfway point in the season yet. And yes, we have the trade deadline looming in about 6 weeks. Dave's White Sox are doing extraordinarily well, given the expectations. 38-33. Tied for first. I believe they are percentage points actually ahead of the Cleveland Guardians, who just lost Jose Ramirez for an extended period of time. I believe he has one of those broken hamate bones in his hand. So he will be gone for probably 2 months. So the path is clear for the Chicago White Sox to possibly run away. I never thought we'd be saying this back in March. The White Sox could run away with the AL Central. Now, interesting thing in this discussion will be brought up with your Uncle Dave, our resident White Sox fan, in the next couple of weeks. He hates that front office. Remember this, kids. He hates the White Sox front office. Do they actually have the guts to try to make some bold moves with this young team in order to propel themselves into contention for the World Series? I know, it sounds insane, but think about it. Look at the standings in the American League. We've been talking about it all year. The National League is far superior this year to the American League. Outside of the New York Yankees, who should you be scared of in the American League? The answer is no one. So if the White Sox could pull off some, do I dare say Tarek Skubal? I don't think it would happen. I don't think Detroit would trade within their own division. It's not unprecedented. I just don't see it happening. God, please don't let them trade him to the Yankees or the Dodgers, though. My God, that would be terrible for baseball. Now, it would obviously reinforce the thinking of the owners going into a potential lockout. So in that sense, it would work for us baseball fans who want them to blow the whole fucking thing up and start from scratch. Now, the White Sox have been going through a brutal stretch of the schedule. They're holding their own, although they're starting to scuffle here a little bit against the Yankees on the road. But when they were at home and they were playing the Braves and the Dodgers, they held up okay. They did have some issues with one Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Of course, the ace of the Dodgers pitching staff. Need to give him some credit here. I don't know if I'm going to go so far as to call him a badass of the week, but stretching over 2 games, including one of those games with the White Sox, Yamamoto retired 45 straight batters, which tied for the second longest streak ever in Major League Baseball history. Yeah, you know what? What the hell? He should be a Clint Eastwood badass of the week as well. That's pretty impressive. Again, tying the second longest streak ever in baseball history, retiring 45 batters in a row across 2 games. And then finally, before we move on to NASCAR, last week I happened to give you a little bit of an update and insight into the A's initial jaunt into their future home. Not the stadium, but the city. As they started a week-long stint in the ballpark of their Las Vegas AAA affiliate. Now, keep in mind, this stadium is well above sea level. I do believe I read that next to Coors Field in Denver, this minor league ballpark would qualify as the second highest. Of course, when you're talking about Denver, it's got to be the highest, right? Yeah, man, cool. No, we're talking about above sea level here, stoners. So, last week I mentioned that in the first game they played in this minor league ballpark, the A's were playing the Brewers and they jacked out 11 total home runs in the first game. Now, compiling the statistics for all 6 games, now that their little stint in Vegas is done for now. Of course, they will move in to their permanent home in Vegas in 2028. Don't worry. Dome Stadium, you will not get the same effect as you did outdoors here at this AAA stadium. However, in the 6 games that they played, this quote-unquote homestand for the A's in Las Vegas, again, 6 games, 102 total runs scored. If you do the math, that comes out to 17 total runs scored per game. The average across Major League Baseball this year, runs scored per game, both teams combined, just under 9, 8.96. So that should tell you the numbers last week for the A's and whoever they played were skewed. Badly for the pitchers, very, very well for the hitters. And I play fantasy baseball. Not very well, but I play fantasy baseball. Much better at fantasy football. But today I actually, despite the fact I knew these numbers, I went out and picked up a player who was on waivers from the A's because, of course, he'd been putting up ridiculous numbers, offensive numbers, over the past couple weeks, including the games that they played in Las Vegas. I knew it. I still picked him up off of waivers because I'm desperate. I'm not doing very well this year at all. I've got one rotisserie team, of course, and one head-to-head team. The head-to-head team's just barely hanging on. I still got a shot with them, but the roto team is miserable. The worst I've ever had in 20 plus years of playing fantasy baseball. too many injuries, too many bad draft picks over across both teams. And a lot of you can probably relate to this. I drafted guys like Manny Machado, Trey Turner, Fernando Tatis Jr. Now, this is across both teams. So, at least the misery is spread out a little bit. But you can tell just a pattern of misery, underachieving. And then, of course, I had Aaron Judge, and he's injured now on one of these teams. Randy Arozarena was playing great. He's injured now. Just the worst year possibly ever for me in fantasy baseball. But you don't want to hear about that. You want to hear about NASCAR. Our weekly update on NASCAR and racing in general. And of course, we have all 8 of our expert panels picks in for a brand new race. First time ever on the Cup Series schedule. First, let's talk about the other circuits, the other leagues. Start off with F1. This past weekend was the Barcelona Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton comes out on top. His record-extending 106th career F1 victory. We also had the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and Toyota ends up winning that endurance race. Arguably the best part, though, if you get online and search for it, you can find a interview. Now, he's on the phone or on Zoom, so you don't get to see him. But Jimmy Johnson, yes, NASCAR legend Jimmy Johnson was doing an interview with some of the commentators at Le Mans, and it was obvious that Jimmy Johnson was drunk off his ass. Search it out online. It's a couple minutes, maybe 3 or 4. You tell me if you are going to dispute this. If you want to dispute this, fine. Drop us a comment. But I'm telling you, I don't see how anybody could listen to this and not realize that Jimmy Johnson is lit. He is 3 sheets to the wind. In fact, I do believe I heard that Dale Earnhardt Jr. commented on this interview and basically said, "See, I told you guys he was a party animal." Something to that effect. But let's move on to NASCAR. The Cup Series, of course, the one true racing series that we follow and we love most of the time. Silly season is already in high gear. Even though he is going to finish out the year for the Wood brothers in the number 21 car, Josh Berry is out of that car at the end of the 2026 season. His replacement has already been named. Jesse Love will strap into the number 21 Wood brothers car in 2027 in the Cup Series. Chris Buescher having a very, very good year as we've moved over to more of a strict point system, which seems to be benefiting him in that he's not really a guy who wins a lot of races, but can run very well, very consistently, get you those stage points. And that's why he is having probably, dare I say, his best year as a Cup driver. And while the rest of RFK Racing, of course that would be Roush, Fenway, Keselowski Racing, is struggling, Chris Buescher is keeping the organization afloat, so he has received a multi-year extension to stay with RFK Racing. Now we go back to last weekend's race at Pocono. Now, if you guys know anything about Pocono, that's one of the tracks on the Cup Series circuit where you have a driver who's a no-brainer. We'll talk more about a situation like that when it comes to our picks for this week's race. But last weekend at Pocono, everybody who knows anything about NASCAR knows that Denny Hamlin is the current king of Pocono. I believe he's won there 8 times now. Because yes, he got the pole. Not because of rain, but because he earned it. He knows that track like the back of his hand. And even though in the past few years we have not seen a lot of this, where drivers are dominating week after week after week, we've seen it with Tyler Reddick earlier in the season, and now we're seeing it with Denny Hamlin. As Denny Hamlin did indeed win at Pocono for his 3rd consecutive victory in the Cup Series. And he has cut Tyler Reddick's point lead down. Now, the good thing for Tyler Reddick is that we're going to get in the next 2 weeks to some road courses where he is much better than Denny Hamlin. So he might be able to get that lead extended out again a little bit. Of course, Denny Hamlin has won at Nashville, Michigan, and now at Pocono. Once again, 3 in a row for Denny Hamlin. And that leads us into our picks for race number 17 of the 2026 Cup season. This coming Sunday, Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. June the 21st, 2026. As I mentioned, a brand new race. This is a very cool setup here. They're going to be racing a street course on Coronado Air Base in San Diego, California. The Anduril Race the Base 250 for the first time ever doing a situation like this. I believe it's an Air Force base. Don't quote me on that. I don't think it's a naval base. But I could be wrong. Sorry, not trying to insult the military here. But I do believe it's Coronado. It could be a naval base, though, given it's San Diego. So what the hell do I know? But I'm hoping for the best here. The one thing that sucks is this Father's Day. Now I got to make a decision. I got to make a choice between watching this cool new Cup race on this street course on a naval or Air Force base, or watching the final round of the U.S. Open, one of the 4 majors on the PGA Tour schedule. Why do you do this? Why? Last Sunday there was nothing on. I get it, it's Father's Day, you're trying to cram all this cool stuff in for the dads, but I will probably watch the golf, and here's why. I'll record the race. With the way the sports media works, they're more likely to spoil the U.S. Open than they are to spoil who wins at Coronado. That's going to be the only thing that's my saving grace in this whole deal. is trying to outthink ESPN and Amazon Prime and all these other sports outlets. Now, the other thing is, if this race is really, really cool, and of course we all hope it is, I just have a very, very, very bad feeling that this is a one and done. Kind of like what they did with Mexico City, because there are already very, very strong rumors out there, almost 100% confirmed, that they're going to go back to Chicago in 2027 and run that street course again, which I would imagine would be the race that takes the place of this. However, are they really going to give 2 races to Chicago? Because remember, later this year, they're going back to Chicagoland Speedway. So is that going to be a one and done? I can't see them getting that track back in shape after all the years that it's been dormant for one race. So yeah, unfortunately, I think this Coronado race could be a one and done. So enjoy it, kids. Our picks. Now I'll have to explain this here. If you guys have been listening over the years, you know we have our little competitions among our expert panel of 8. We've been doing this for well over a decade in terms of the current incarnation, the 8 people that we have in the family right now. Now, your Uncle Dave and I, along with the elder statesmen, have been doing this since the early 90s. We took some time off. Some of us, me, moved away for a while, so we had a break there, but when I came back, we started it back up again. Initially, I think we only really did football picks. Then when I came back in the early 2000s, we started in with football picks, did our brackets for March Madness, and then, of course, started in with NASCAR. So our NASCAR competition, right now we have 5 competitions. We call it the Penta Frenzy, because we also added fantasy football, and then we added a baseball contest. So the logical choice, here's what I'm getting at here. This is why I'm trying to explain this to you guys. Because the logical choice would be if you had no restrictions whatsoever, and you could pick whoever you wanted willy-nilly every week. You'd be insane not to take Shane Van Gisbergen this week and next week at Sonoma. However, our contest limits everyone to only being able to take a driver 3 times maximum in the first 26 races. There are 4 road courses or street courses in the first 26 races this year. So you had to make a tough decision. I wish I could take back taking Shane Van Gisbergen at COTA early in the year. That was the first road course. He was fine. He did very well, but he did not win. So now, after taking him at Watkins Glen, with 2 road courses left this weekend and next weekend, I can only use SVG one more time. And your Uncle Dave is in the exact same boat as me. So, because we are both brilliant beyond belief, and our brilliant minds think alike 99.97% of the time, which is why we should be running everything, he and I said, okay, Coronado's brand new. Coronado is an unknown. even though, yes, it is technically a street course. Shane Van Gisbergen has won Sonoma before. He knows Sonoma. So your Uncle Dave and I are holding off on our final SVG pick for next week. So that's a little look into the future for you for our picks for Sonoma next week. However, there are other panelists who were a little bit more prudent in how they use their SVG picks. So there's going to be a little bit of carnage here, I think, for your Uncle Dave and I. We're going to take a little bit of a hit in the point standings because there are going to be some people, not everybody, but there are going to be some people on the panel who can take Shane Van Gisbergen this week and next week. But there are some who are also in the same boat as us and decided to burn their final SVG pick this week. So they'll have to scramble and figure out what their backup plan is going to be for next week at Sonoma. All that being said, I hope I explained this. Because again, in a sane and logical world, all of us would have taken Shane Van Gisbergen this week and next week. But with our restrictions in our game, doesn't work. Now, the ones who did take him this week out of our expert panel: Sam, Bill, Jen, Nick, and Aaron. 5 of the 8 on our expert panel are taking SVG. Like I said, some of them will take him again next week. Some will not be able to. Doug is taking Chase Elliott. Dave and I, as I mentioned, we're doing something a little bit different. We're saving our final Shane Van Gisbergen picks for next week. So Dave and I are both taking Tyler Reddick for Coronado, the brand new street course this weekend. So we will see how this all plays out. All I'm hoping for, not to lose too much ground, and then next week make up some of that ground on some of the people that can't take Shane Van Gisbergen at Sonoma. So that's going to do it for our overview of all of the world of sports for this week. Again, taping here on June the 17th, 2026. This will drop early Thursday morning, June the 18th. Of course, I will be doing this, wrapping it up, posting it, and then I'm going to try to get to bed so I can wake up in the morning and start watching the U.S. Open. But we're not quite done yet. You know this. Unfortunately, we have to first, as we start to wrap things up, we have to discuss moments of silence. Those athletes and sports figures who have passed in the last week. We have one, but it is a truly, truly sad story. Alden Smith. Now, Alden Smith died at the age of 36 years old here over the past week. Alden Smith came into the league in his first couple years as a defensive end for the San Francisco 49ers, tore it up. If it wasn't for the fact that he came in at the same time as Von Miller, he would have gotten even more accolades than he did. But I do believe at the time, over his first 2 seasons, he posted more sacks than anybody else had ever at that point in time over their first 2 seasons in the history of the NFL. Unfortunately, his demons caught up with him. Substance abuse issues, derailed what was looking to be early on a potential Hall of Fame level career. He still was able to sporadically produce some good numbers, but eventually ended up dropping out of the league much sooner than you would have liked to have seen. And even though we do not have a cause of death and we're not going to speculate, I can't believe that if and when that information is disclosed, it's going to be anything good. So I hope Aldon Smith is in a better place. I have a hard time when it comes to drug abuse, substance abuse, in that I can't sit there and praise someone who went down that road. I know addiction is a problem, and we always, whether it's gambling or more importantly, the physical addiction of substance abuse, get help, reach out. There are people that care and that love you, family and friends. And even if you're one of the rare cases where you don't have family and friends, there are centers. There are people that want to help you. Please get that help. Do not end up like Aldon Smith. So that means, of course, we do our pivot. I cannot do it as well as your Uncle Dave or as Ross Geller, a.k.a. David Schwimmer and Friends. Pivot! Pivot! From sorrow to stupidity. As we end each and every show here on Sports Frenzy, whether it's the weekend edition or the sports edition, with the Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. As your Uncle Dave would say, who will be the recipient of the golden boot up the ass this week? And of course, you are always encouraged to contribute. Drop us a line, drop us a comment on any of our platforms or on Facebook. Facebook, preferably. We will see that a lot sooner. If you agree, if you want to cast your vote, if you have someone who you think we've missed, we always are willing to read suggestions, because there is a lot of stupidity to go around in this world. So let's start off. Now, we mentioned that the NASCAR race this coming Father's Day is in San Diego. So let's stay in San Diego for our first nominee for the Dumbass of the Week. That would be one Phil Mickelson. Now, Phil Mickelson, we know that Live Golf is falling apart. That can't be sitting well with Phil. He has not played golf for a while on the PGA Tour. He's been talking about personal issues, personal health issues within his family. But this does not look good given all of that. Phil Mickelson was recently kicked out of a San Diego golf club that he has been a member of for quite a while, frequented for quite a while, because of, quote, misconduct, unquote, involving, yes, a female employee. We all know what that means, right? And of course, Phil is hiring lawyers and threatening lawsuits, trying to clear his name. Now, you've heard your Uncle Dave and I in the past talk about situations like this. And we live by the motto, innocent until proven guilty, because we have seen a lot of situations like this turn 180 degrees. Yes, we'll reference the Duke rape case again, but that's not the only one. There are others. However, this doesn't seem to fall into the category of extortion. Now, could I be proven wrong? Sure. I just wonder. I've never thought Phil Mickelson was a saint. It's turning out a lot of these golfers aren't. Of course, you know how Dave and I feel about Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy, and if we got to lump Phil Mickelson in with them, so be it. But given how, again, Phil Mickelson has been talking about private family matters recently, and how he has always stressed that he is a family man, this is not a good look for him. Lefty needs to somehow prove to us that there is something going on here and he was not at fault. Otherwise, this is going to be a very, very bad year for Phil Mickelson. An Ipswich, Massachusetts high school lacrosse team. Now, this is not condemning the Ipswich lacrosse team. It's the school, it's the superintendent of the school district, whoever decided, listen, rules are rules, and I get that. Rules are rules. I am usually, for the most part, very, very steadfast in my desire for everyone to stick to the rules. I am a get off my lawn guy. However, something about this seems like maybe the school district, the school superintendent went too far. This high school lacrosse team had to forfeit their state semifinal match. Why? Because, again, social media, the bane of all existence. Pictures were posted online. No, don't get your mind in the gutter. Pictures were posted online of this high school lacrosse team from Ipswich, Massachusetts, smoking cigars. Violation of the policy against tobacco use. I get it. But boy, if this had happened back in the 80s or even the 90s, nobody would have said anything about it. It almost seems like now, as disgusting, and I'm not a smoker. I've indulged on occasion with cigars. I understand it is a filthy, filthy habit. But it almost seems like we forgive pot smoking more than we forgive tobacco smoking now. All of it's bad, okay? Let me be clear about that. All of it's bad. But for the powers that be to ruin this lacrosse team's chances at winning a title. Now, there was some bullshit floating around about the students knew about the policy against tobacco, so that they had these cigars made with tea leaves. Okay, I don't know if I buy that, but still, even if it was plain old tobacco, could we just maybe cut these kids a break? So, again, whoever was in charge, whoever forced these kids to forfeit the state semifinal, to me, they're dumbasses. This is a tie-in to Frenzy 5-0. If you guys know about our Frenzy 5-0, again, something we've been doing for a long, long time on Sports Frenzy, whether it was in the studio, on cable access, whether it was on YouTube back in the day when we did videos. Frenzy 5-0 is when we call out the athletes who get in trouble with the law. Well, we've got two big name athletes who got in trouble with the law. We're just going to drop them here in the Red Foreman Dumbass segment. First up, your favorite basketball player and mine. Note sarcasm. James Harden. James Harden arrested in Houston on misdemeanor weapons charges. The dumbass was pulled over and had a gun in plain sight sitting on the passenger seat. Now, there's a difference between, to me, owning a gun and being a part of gun culture. Responsible gun owners know what they're doing, know how to store their guns safely, whether it's at home, whether it's in a car or vehicle. They are aware of the particular rules and regulations when it comes to the state or the city that they are in. Obviously, James Harden is a complete and total dumbass, not only because of the way he acts and behaves in the NBA, but now, once again, because of the way he behaves in society. But worse could be one of the biggest names in boxing, Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather is in big time trouble. He has had 2 felony charges filed against him because he bounced a $200,000 check trying to buy an expensive watch. Now, it sounds from the story that I read that he had every opportunity in the world to make good on this without the law getting involved. This incident happened at the end of 2024. So all through 2025, without, again, getting the law involved. Whoever sold, whatever company, whatever retail outlet sold him the watch, tried to get a hold of him, tried to give him every opportunity to make good on the bounced check. And Floyd Mayweather basically ignored them, or as the kids say, ghosted them for over a year, to the point where they finally had to file charges. And now, because Floyd Mayweather let this go and let it slide, it didn't take care of it. Again, he has 2 felonies facing him because this is now theft. This is now theft. Congratulations, Floyd Mayweather. You are a dumbass. And oh, by the way, have you noticed? And again, this is something I read in the article, that he is all of a sudden signing up for all these big-time exhibition boxing matches. I wonder why. Because they also said that he's got a massive, I believe, $7 million federal tax lien, despite all the money he's made in his career. This is a lesson, kids. Don't trust anybody with your money. Manage your money well and smartly. Don't be a dumbass like Floyd Mayweather. Then finally, Going to go off on a little rant here on our final dumbass nominee, and that would be Major League Baseball. And this is a follow-up to my badass from last week. If you remember, my Clint Eastwood badass last week was Blake Trinan of the Los Angeles Dodgers, who decided he was not going to wear the Dodgers Pride Night cap and instead opted for the regular Dodgers hat. Now, you are allowed to do that in MLB. You do not get in trouble for refusing to wear the Pride Night hats. You are allowed to go ahead and just wear the normal, everyday team cap. It's not a violation of uniform regulations. However, if you guys remember, this happened with the Dodgers a few years ago with Clayton Kershaw, future Hall of Fame pitcher, where he wrote a Bible verse, a reference to a Bible verse on his pride cap. Now, he didn't get in trouble, but we had a situation here recently in San Francisco. Of course it had to be San Francisco, where pitcher Landon Rope did basically the same thing as Clayton Kershaw. He wrote a reference to a Bible verse on his hat. Then there were two other teammates who also refused, like Blake Trinan did with the Dodgers, they refused to wear the rainbow Pride Night cap. But now the problem is, Major League Baseball has stepped in it because they sent out a notice saying that this will not be tolerated anymore. Not the guys who decide to wear the standard version of the team cap, but the guys who write the Bible verse references on their hat. They are saying that is a strict violation of the uniform code. A lot of people are talking about rumblings and rumors of you could end up looking at lawsuits for religious discrimination. I don't think this is going to go anywhere. It'll be interesting to see next year what happens with all this Pride Night stuff. And when you've got some devout Christians who do not agree with Pride Night and want to express their particular beliefs, which they should have every right to do if the LGBTQAPC and the Alphabet Mafia, if the Alphabet Mafia gets to scare and frighten people into bending the knee for them, where are the rights for the religious people, the Christians? That's what I think is going to cause a lot of problems for Major League Baseball here. A lot of problems. Because you can't have it both ways. You can't force your players or strongly suggest that your players support Pride Night, where on the flip side, you tell them your religious beliefs are not allowed to be on display. It's a slippery slope, and right now, MLB looks really bad. They look like dumbasses. Way to go, Rob Manfred. Way to go. So to recap, your nominees for the Red Foreman Dumbasses of the Week here on June the 17th are Phil Mickelson for his inappropriate behavior with a female employee at a San Diego golf club. The school officials who forced the Ipswich lacrosse team, high school team in Massachusetts, to forfeit the state semifinal because they had pictures of them smoking cigars. Two big-time athletes breaking the law, James Harden and Floyd Mayweather. And then Major League Baseball for being hypocrites when it comes to Pride Night and possibly setting themselves up for a religious discrimination lawsuit. For me, my choice, I'm not going to go with Major League Baseball because there's still a chance they could dig themselves out of this hole. There's still a chance. Like I said, if this quietly goes away next year, they're not pestering and forcing people into this Pride Night stuff, then the problem's gone away. I'm going to go with Floyd Mayweather. This guy sounds like an absolute scumbag. Bouncing a check for $200,000, and then when the company or the retailer is giving him over a year to make good on it, and he ignores them, then he wonders why he is facing felony charges. He is literally the definition, the poster child for the dumbass of the week. And that's going to do it for Sports Frenzy here on June the 17th. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Your Uncle Dave will be back next week. Don't forget to check out the weekend edition this coming Saturday morning, June the 20th. Again, I will review Journey live in concert. I will also review the great, creepy, weird new movie just hit HBO Max, They Will Kill You. Could have some other interesting reviews for you. And, of course, we will have our weekly look at new trailers and our weekly look at the entertainment business. News and headlines from that. Again, we love you. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for hanging with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane, solo this week. We'll be back to normal next week on June the 24th. But again, check out the weekend edition, your Saturday morning hangover cure. Otherwise, we will see you back here again in 7 days, kids. Peace out.